Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm here today with Rob Henderson, and we're talking about the show HBO show Deadwood, which ran in the aughts for 3 seasons. And we've only watched the beginning of it, so we've only watched season one and then season two, episodes 1 and 2. So there will be spoilers through season two, episodes 1 and 2, and we don't know what happened. We don't know what happens after that. So we're gonna like speculate and stuff. So there's spoilers, but there's also we have limited knowledge about where the series goes. So if you wanna, if you don't want spoilers, if you want to follow along with us, you just watch up to that point and mute this if mute this or close this podcast or whatever, and then come back when you've caught up with us. And so, Rob, Andreessen recommended this to me for a while. He might have even recommended while we were recording the
Yeah, I
Shield.
think he mentioned it when we were during our Shield conversation. I remember he mentioned it.
And it lived up to the hype. I mean, I think it's top tier as far as shows I've watched. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, people have been recommending me this show for more than 10 years now. People have been telling me how great this show is, and I was never like a big fan of westerns. I like Clint Eastwood as an actor, but I never got into like the sort of like the cowboy western kind of thing, like those movies, John Wayne and all of that. That's kind of what I thought this was, like the HBO mini series, extended series version of that. And so it just didn't really seem that appealing to me. But then, since you and I have been doing these discussions, and Andreessen recommended it, and people have been recommending it to me for so long, I finally got around to it. And it's I've seen it mentioned alongside other great TV shows, right, like Sopranos and Breaking Bad and all Wire. And Deadwood is often mentioned there, not always, but often. And I'd have to say it definitely belongs there. It's so far, at least, it's been an incredible show.
Yeah, I agree. It's top. I mean, I think my favorite show of all that whole era is Sopranos, and I mean Breaking Bad is up there. And you don't like Better Call Saul, but I think it's in the running. And it's I mean Deadwood is there. Deadwood is in that top category for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so let me ask you this: Who do you think is the main character of the show? Because it's not as obvious as in a lot of other shows.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's arguments to be made for either Seth Bullock, the sheriff now, and it opens with him, right? Like he's the first sort of
Mm,
main character you see in this show, um, where he like what performs an impromptu hanging of
yeah.
a criminal that he has in his in the local jail, and the mob comes after this guy and they want to kill him, and Seth realizes that if he doesn't kill this guy, that the mob will, so he decides to have this sort of imprimatur of the law, of like a legal process, and just hangs him on site instead of waiting till the following day or whatever. So I guess, yeah, the Bullock arguably, but then Swearingen is, just like way more interesting to watch. Anti-heroes just
Swearinger,
generally.
not Swearingen, right?
So
Swearinger.
Swearingen, like,
No, are you sure Swearingen? Are you sure it's not Swearinger?
I'm like 90%. Let me swear. Yeah, it's all Swearingen.
Okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Wait, he's a
Yeah.
real character. Okay, I'm not gonna. It just pulled up on Wikipedia. It looks like it's a picture of a real guy, but I'm not gonna read. I don't want to know anything. It sounds like he might have been a
Uh,
real person.
Yeah, I think, well,
Don't
all
read.
of these, so all of the whole show is
Oh,
loosely based on real events.
oh, no
Um,
way.
oh, you didn't know? Okay, yeah. So the creator, David Milch, he also was the showrunner for NYPD Blue back in the 90s, which was like at that time like kind of the 90s era equivalent of prestige television. I guess, like, NYPD Blue was like gritty and dark and had an anti-hero protagonist, for its time. But yeah, this show he drew on like real life events. So not all of the characters are based on real people, but many of them are. And like he takes creative license with
Yeah,
different
I'd imagine. I'd
aspects
imagine.
of the historical timeline. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So
uh,
Swearingen. Is it so? Who do you, yeah? So who do you think it is if you had to pick one?
I mean, okay, so I don't know how to think about that, because like, what does main character mean? Like, something that just jumped into my mind would be the main character is the one you'd be most surprised by if they killed him off, and I think I'd be more surprised if they killed Swearingen off than Bullock.
No, I don't.
Uh,
I don't think that's a good. I don't think that's a good definition. Like Sopranos, like you watch Sopranos, you're like, okay, like it's not like Carmela's the main character. Because I would have been more surprised if they killed off Carmela than Tony or something. I mean, or so I almost thought Tony might get killed
yeah,
off.
no. If they killed off Tony, like that would be the most shocking thing in the show, right? Like
Well, not at the
it's not
end.
like I'm the main
At the
character.
end of at the end
Oh,
of the
and at
show.
the
I
end.
thought
Oh,
you were, yeah.
I'm not talking about the end. I'm just
Okay.
talking about like in the middle of an episode
Yeah.
somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like if Seth Bullock dies in a shootout, or like he's killed by the dirt worshippers, then I think that would be like if he had been killed in that fist fight he had with the Indian. Remember, like he's knocked
Yeah.
off his horse, and if he was killed then, it would have been shocking, but not
Yeah.
like not super surprising. Whereas I think if Swearingen dies at any point from now till the end of the series, that would be kind of shocking to me. But I don't know. What do you think? Who do you think is the main
Yeah,
character?
yeah, I do. I think it's Swearingen. I think there's a little bit of a head fake where they want you to think it's Bullock. I mean, I'd be surprised if either of them died. I don't know. Do shows need one main character? I think so, and I think that a lot of the prestige TV, I'm just thinking about this. They're built around sort of just the sort of outlier charisma of like one man, right?
Hmm.
Draper, Soprano, um,
Hmm.
Walter White. Each of
Yeah.
these shows has someone like that, and they just stand out. And Bullock is, I think it's like a little bit of a head fake. Like, oh, the show starts with him. He's like a good guy. He's like supposed to like represent like I don't know, like duty and honor and like decency and whatever. But he's not that interesting. Like I watch. He doesn't make you laugh. You don't like. You're not really. You like him and whatever. He's a good guy and honorable and all that. But Swearinger is, Swearingen. You're just captivated by him. You see, he's got all these men around him. I mean, you're laughing. You're in his mind. You're watching him sort of. He's just interested. He's interested because he's more complicated than Bullock. He's trying to plan something while Bullock is just trying to run a hardware store and enforce justice, I guess. And Swearingen, man, seems to want to be, sort of the king of the American West or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the show is trying to, at least at this point where we are, it seems like the show or the creators, they're trying to show this sort of duality of like maybe how America views itself, or like the sort of the mythos around the expansion of the American territories or something, where like Bullock is like the face of it, right? Like Bullock is who we want to believe we are, or like the sort of flattering self-image we have of like what the American Old West was like, about this sort of honorable, dutiful sheriff who, he doesn't even want to be sheriff. He like reluctantly takes power, even if he doesn't want to, but we can all tell that he is actually the most qualified person. Like he's the guy you'd want to be the sheriff of a town like that. And we're sort of relieved, I think, near the end of season 1 when he finally accepts that mantle, despite like season 1 kind of running from it. And then Swearingen is like probably the guy, like that's the person who, like that's the type of personality who got things actually done. Like they're the ones behind the scenes who actually made things happen in the American Old West. So it's like, and I think Swearingen is kind of aware of this, right? Like he wanted Bullock to be the sheriff. He wanted to have like this clean cut front man for Deadwood to like give like to lend legitimacy to, it's a camp, but it's going to be annexed, and they want to like sort of keep things how they are. And he knows that if they have Seth Bullock as their sheriff, it sort of gives the appearance of this being like everything is smooth and above board, and not run by a bunch of outlaws. Whereas Swearingen is like, he's the most interesting character. He's actually the one sort of pulling the strings, and the man everyone goes to, right? Like he's clearly the one who holds power in the town too, because every time there's a meeting among the elite of Deadwood, it's always in the
Yeah.
gem, right? It's always in his saloon, and he's the one hosting it with his canned fruits.
Yeah. Although I don't think that's the only reason he wanted Bullock to be the sheriff. I think that there probably it was good to have a non-corrupt sheriff. It's sort of like about like the stationary bandit, like the idea that like someone who's like gains control over a territory wants to enforce law because he wants it to territory to grow, and he wants to be able to get taxation and all that. So this Swearingen is like sort of the king of this place, and he needs it to function well. He has legitimate sort of interests.
Mm.
in the city functioning, and having like a non-corrupt, like competent sheriff, it seems to me to be like a way for him to do that, not just the sort of PR benefits of having Bullock there.
Yeah, yeah, that was an interesting twist because I think in a lot of these kinds of shows and like in the popular imagination you would think like a gangster or like a mafia boss, like they want someone corrupt to be the head of the police or the sheriff or like the sort of the person who's in charge of the law because the a criminal leader would want they would think that a corrupt police officer would be more open to dealing with them. But Swearingen is, he's depicted as like very shrewd, and he's aware that like he can deal with Bullock, and he can actually sort of operate close to the bounds of the law with his saloon and what he's doing. And I guess like the opium and the dope, like that's kind of, I actually don't know like the legal status of drugs in
It's legal. I
America.
mean, it's legal.
Is it?
The American federal government didn't, and this place has no law. This place is not even the federal government, but the federal
Right.
government, I think, didn't start banning substances until like early 20th century. So in the Old
Okay.
West, yeah, there's nothing illegal about opium. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, then at that point, yeah, then it kind of makes sense that Swearingen would want someone who
Yeah, this
who
was the
can
era
also
when the British
predict.
were going to war with China to force them to like open, to open their market. So yeah, people didn't believe
Yeah.
in the prohibition stuff.
Yeah. That makes, yeah. So then for Swearingen, right? Like he wants someone who he can deal with and whose behavior he can that's predictable, right? Like unlike Cy Tolliver, who is kind of Swearingen's rival, who runs what is it, the Bella something? What's his saloon
Uh,
called? A Bella Union. Is it
yeah,
Bella Union or Bella
the
Union?
Bella Union sounds right.
Bella
Yeah.
Union. Um, and so someone like that, right? Like he's a little bit of a hothead. He's impulsive. He's smart and calculating, but like I don't know that you would necessarily be able to
Is he?
predict
I mean,
him.
is he
Whereas Bullock, you would always know.
Is he? I mean, he seems calculated. What he's trying to do with the Chinese, he's trying to use racial grievance to get the
Oh, yeah,
whites to attack the Chinese to like take their land. And when he deals with when the American military comes in, and he actually, I mean, this is a very kind of maintain order kind of thing. He tries to offer them like money to keep an American troop presence there. So he also wants, and everyone sees the American the American military as army, I guess, as not corrupt and like keeping order. And then the general whichever general that is he's talking to, he's like, oh sir, if this was civilian life, I'd if I was a sheriff, I'd hang you or something like that. So Tolliver seems, you're right, he's more hot-headed. He is more hot-headed when it comes to women in
yeah.
particular. um
What's
I,
interesting is like I read that so the character, the actor who plays Cy Tolliver was actually initially slated to play Swearingen. Uh,
uh
so I thought that was an interesting. Like I don't know how he would have played Swearingen differently, but instead he got this other role, which is like sort of Swearingen's doppelganger in a
yeah.
way, not exactly the same, but plays a similar role. Like he's kind of Swearingen's rival in the town, and so yeah, I guess he's the show does something interesting. Like a lot of shows do this with anti-heroes, where in order to get you on like this unsavory anti-hero side, they make the other guy even worse. And so despite like Swearingen being he commits several egregious acts, but it portrays them in a sort of an understandable way, at least some of them. Whereas with Cy Tolliver, right, like they clearly make him out to be like a much more unlikable character, especially in the episode with the two teenagers who what they're sort of
Oh yeah,
impersonating
yeah,
these sort of innocent these sort of two innocent kids, but they turn out to be hustlers. And
yeah.
Cy Tolliver is clearly I mean, after he tortures the kids, he says he only did it because he had to put on a show to prevent other people from trying to steal from him. But I don't know. I found that a little hard to believe based on everything else we know about the character. I think a part of him enjoyed that.
I'm sure. I'm sure he did. He wanted revenge. Yeah, that was dark. That was dark. Cy
That was a
Tolliver.
pretty grim scene, man. Like
Yeah,
that was actually the moment where I realized, like, oh no, Deadwood is not just like a sort of western, right? Because like a lot of those other westerns, I think like it would have had these two little teenage kids like blowing into town, making off with the goods, and then like everyone would have been mad at them, and you would have like you wouldn't have liked those kids, but you would have thought like, oh well, good for them, whatever. Like, but in this show, it's like nope. Like in Deadwood, these kids are going to be like tortured captured and punished and killed in like the
Yeah.
most brutal fashion
Well,
possible.
yeah, I mean, and this is like a luxury, like, oh, people steal from you, haha, you have this is a luxury of very rich societies, right? These people are living on the edge of the frontier of civilization, and they can, I mean, I sympathize with the need to keep order. And this is even Bullock, the most clean character, has a harsh idea of justice. If you steal something, you get put to death, right? So
Mm.
there's nobody differs on that. Like nobody differs on harsh justice in the show, and I think that's probably true to the time, and reflects sort of the values you need in order to survive in that environment.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because Deadwood doesn't have like they don't really have a police presence. They don't have. I mean, it doesn't even seem like they have straightforward laws, right? Because it's not technically a part of the United States yet. It's sort of this outpost. Aren't they on like Indian territory? There's some like negotiations
Yeah,
ongoing with
it's
the federal government. Um, and so there's actually no formal laws or like governing bodies
yeah.
or
Well, I mean,
police.
they didn't even get him
Yeah.
a single sheriff until, I mean, there's no police, there's nothing,
Yeah.
and there's
Until
nobody.
that guy, not Ellsworth, but before Bullock, right? Like they had the guy who was kind of the sheriff but didn't do anything, and then
Yeah,
Bullock took over. Uh, and yet it manages to operate right with some degree of civility and predictability, and people are able to do business. And I think, yeah, the sort of looming threat of violence is sort of what keeps everyone in line. And like I mean, yeah, violence regularly breaks out, but I think the sort of the fear of it keeps it from becoming anarchic.
yeah, yeah. And I was thinking about, I was recently read Joe Heinrich's books, and I had him on the podcast, just for the released the podcast the other day, and the transcript. And I was thinking about weird morality in the context of the Old West, and like you had these people who like almost all men, except for the women who are prostitutes, who come out there and they're building something out of complete anarchy, and they have saloons and hotels and a lot of these things that are sort of hallmarks of civilization. And this is not a and no laws obviously, and no police, and this is not an accomplishment you could take for granted. Like I think you needed some cultural preconditions for that, and then they start forming government, and they start forming rules, and they learn to live amongst themselves, even though there's corruption and all violence and all that. But nonetheless, they make it work. They form communities out of nothing, right?
Yeah.
And they become something much greater. And I don't think you get that in many other cultures. I think I think you needed the sort of the Western civilizational package for that to work.
The marriage and family program.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, it's yeah, even the like the pimps, right? They have. I mean, yeah, Swearengen's not married, but he had Trixie, right? Like he was in what
yeah.
seemed to be a monogamous relationship. Before Trixie kind of left him for Saul. Um, did we see Al with any other women besides Trixie? I found that
Oh,
surprising.
you're forgetting like the best scenes of the show. After
Which one
you're
is
talking
that?
about before. You're talking before
B-
he got rid of Trixie.
before Trixie, right? Like
You-
before Trixie left him, which he was actually like you could tell this had some emotional effect on him that she
Yeah.
doesn't want to be with him anymore. Um, was he with any? I think he was relatively monogamous and faithful to Trixie,
Yeah,
despite
but I don't
being
think I think he was just busy. I mean, he was busy at the
just
end of the
busy. I
day.
mean, a lot of busy men in that situation, right, would still indulge. Tony was busy, but he would still
Yeah.
occasionally sleep with a
Well,
stripper
no,
at the
it's where
beginning.
Swearingen has access. I don't think he would be monogamous to a prostitute. I just can't. I mean, she's a prostitute. She's sleeping
Yeah,
with other men. I mean,
I
I
know
can't
she's a
imagine.
prostitute, but you'd almost never see Al, to my knowledge. Yeah, at least in my memory, I can't remember. Yeah, he was. He would sleep like he would have a place reserve his bed for her, and
Yeah,
was
that's true.
clearly unhappy when she basically like what more or less broke up with him
Yeah,
to be with Saul. And then Sai, right? Like Sai has his main his main squeeze. What's her name?
Joni. Joni.
Joanne, Joni, right? Joni, and yeah, like he doesn't really seem particularly interested in sleeping with other women either. So like, yeah, it's interesting. Like, despite both of them operating these brothels and these saloons, they seem to practice monogamy or
Yeah, that's
monogamish,
interesting. Yeah,
and
they
then
are monogamous pimps. Yes. Okay.
monogamous pimps. And
I
then,
mean,
yeah,
we could-
monogamous pimps. That's there's the name for this for this conversation. Uh, but then Seth Bullock, he's not faithful, right? Like this is sort of, despite him being the sort of more classic,
yeah.
straightforward hero character,
Yeah,
his
but those guys aren't married. I mean, it's not like
yeah,
they're, it's not like they're living a Christian life. They're not married. I mean, I don't know. We don't even see Oliver. Do we? We don't even see him sleeping with Joni. I mean, I don't know. I don't know
Tolliver,
who he.
Tolliver. Yeah, he.
Yeah,
Uh, do we not see? I think like he's affectionate toward her, but yeah, I don't think we see them
yeah,
actually sleep together, which is kind of interesting.
yeah.
Um, right. Well, Seth Bullock's character, he's married and he's unfaithful to his wife, but it's kind of complicated because she was married to his brother who was killed in the Civil War, and so he's with her, I guess, in part out of guilt and duty to his brother. But he clearly feels racked with guilt over this, which maybe in a different kind of culture, that wasn't so weird. He wouldn't feel so guilty over sleeping with another woman besides his official wife. And he even gives his lover an ultimatum about like we're either going to leave Deadwood together or you and I are going to have to stop seeing each other because it's unfair, it's humiliating to his wife that they would be carrying on this affair while she's now in town. um so yeah, I thought that the relationships, despite like all of the violence and the swearing and the sort of outlaw mentality, the treatment of romantic relationships was remarkably traditional, I thought. Yeah, like the men are violent towards the women, but most of the violence is basically like a way to like keep them devoted
Well,
to that man, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, the anti-hero. I mean, Swearingen, and then Cy Tolliver is also like a sort of a semi-anti-hero in the film too, in the show too. One of the things they show here, which they don't in other sort of hit TV shows, is like the actual violence towards women. Like Tony Soprano never hits his wife. Don Draper, they were both in situations where you might expect that they might hit their wives, but they don't. They never show that. And I think maybe you probably couldn't even do that. Maybe you couldn't even do that today. Like maybe even in the past, like you'd have to show that like the guy doesn't beat his wife or whatever. But the
Hmm.
fact that like Swear like he beats up these women. This is something it's like unique to it, and even like the way he explicit content alert, the way he pounds Trixie, right?
Trixie,
Yeah,
in
he
the
just he
first
just pounds her.
episode.
It's like a violent kind of, it's like a violent, very violent kind of sex. And then these scenes with the woman he replaced Trixie with, where he's just like talking to her. She's like not even there. She's like not even a person. He's like using her and like enjoying her, and then just like talking to her and like thinking through like what he needs to be doing. I mean, those are amazing scenes. I think that the few scenes with his new lover. I wonder where it's going to go with that. But yeah, you're right. That's also monogamous. Although he's
Yeah,
with
because
that
it's
same.
just the one. It's just the same. Like both times,
Yeah,
she's blowing him while he's sort of, delivering a
yeah.
monologue and sort of processing
Yeah,
his thoughts.
maybe he's just a creature of convenience. Like, he doesn't want to choose between all the prostitutes, and he's just like, I'm
Well,
busy, like trying to run this
the
town.
creature of convenience would just like point to the nearest woman and say, "Hey, come over here."
Yeah,
But
but
he keeps choosing this one.
you'd have to like figure out their shift schedule and like what night they're off and like all that.
No, he
While like
wouldn't. He could literally just like announce, like, "Whoever's closest to me, enter my room." Like, he
whoever
could
closest
do
to me,
that.
no, they could
Yeah,
be the person closest to him might have a job, right?
yeah,
He
yeah.
knows Trixie.
Yeah.
He knows
I,
Trixie is off Thursdays at
I
5
think
p.m.
I think Al
and she
Swearengen's a one woman man. I think he's
And and I mean, and another thing is like you can imagine how this could complicate your business if you're sleeping
mm,
with these different women and they're getting jealous and they're fighting over um, who can be sort of the top one,
yeah,
his main girl. So you could
yeah.
like because he doesn't seem to love that second woman. I mean, he doesn't seem to have. Maybe he does in his own weird way, but he almost like enjoys abusing her. And so yeah, maybe that's part of his how he shows love. Maybe that's part of his monogamous sort of part of his sort of monogamous strategy
I
there.
think it is. There's sort of a mate guarding component to it where he
Yeah,
inflicts violence to like instill fear in them so that they won't stray. Like he
like it.
Al Swearingen is the most brutal to Trixie in episode 1 of the series, and she stays with him all the way through, almost up until the final yeah, towards the final episode of season one. And maybe there's an argument to be made that the reason she left him for Saul was because he wasn't he became softer toward her over time. He
Yeah,
wasn't quite
you're
as
right.
physical toward her, and she felt a little bit more more unburdened. Just willing to leave him because she recognized there was this softness in him. Like there was the scene where he remember when he grabs Trixie. I don't remember what episode this was. This is when they were still technically together. He grabs her by the vagina and like squeezes and is like threatening her, and then she runs off, and I think that's when she starts to go towards Saul, right? And yeah, Al
Yeah.
Swearingen kind of feels bad about this, and he's scrubbing the bloodstain on the floor of this was the guy that I think it was Ellsworth killed him, who was staring at the teenage girl, one of the two impersonators. And Al Swearingen, he's clearly like upset that she left him, and he's emotional over it and so forth. And like at least if my sort of rudimentary understanding of like rap songs
Ellsworth,
and like
Ellsworth,
articles about
Ellsworth, not Ellsworth. Dan, Daugherty,
oh,
right?
Dan. Yeah, Dan. I think Dan was the one who killed him. That's right.
Yeah, no, Ellsworth
Uh,
doesn't. Ellsworth is a nice guy.
okay.
Ellsworth is not the one to
Okay.
sweat.
Yeah,
Ellsworth
yeah.
is
I
the
get the I
guy.
get the secondary characters.
Yeah,
Yeah, those ones are well. EB is an easy one to remember, but some of the other secondary characters, the names,
yeah.
yeah,
Ellsworth is the guy who was doing the work for Alma Garrett
yeah,
for the woman, and he's the nice guy, the honest guy.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
He's good.
he's not
Yeah,
a
he's a
swanky.
good guy. Um, But anyway,
Yeah,
yeah. So like, yeah. I like my point was that like pimps aren't supposed to be like emotional, right? Like part of the reason why they're able to win the loyalty of these women is because of like the harshness and the brutality and the sort of coldness. And for whatever reason, this is what draws these broken women to them. And like,
yeah,
it's only when Al starts to like when the cracks start to show and he starts to care for Trixie, that's when she leaves him, right?
yeah. Okay,
So yeah, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that is what happened.
that is great. Yeah, that is a great interpretation. I didn't think of it like that, and you're right. And it's sort of this is the strategy he's using with the new woman. He's got her under his control, and
Breaking her in.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And maybe he'll become soft, and maybe she'll leave. Maybe she'll be improved. Maybe that's
She'll
his
go off
sort of
with Cy Tolliver. Oh
yeah.
man.
That's his pattern. Yeah, Cy Tolliver. Yeah, yeah, that's a very very dark character. Um, you know what would be brave if they showed Bullock beating a woman. That would be brave because it would be like I don't think like a guy who like I don't think a guy like Bullock in that time would be like against like wife beating. Like I think it was probably seen as normal. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure on the history here, but I would think so. Right? It wasn't like bad men beat their wives and good men don't. I don't think it was seen that way.
No, I don't. I think you're right. I think there may have been some nuances here. Like what just came to mind was that scene from The Sopranos where Richie Aprile tells Christopher Moltisanti he's not allowed to beat Adriana until they're married. He's like,
Uh,
he's basically said like, stop beating my niece. Once you two are married, it's none of my business. But like that kind of mentality of like, if you're married, then you can do anything you want to your wife. But if you're not married, you can't just like beat any random woman with impunity. I think
yeah.
that seems like at least that's my sort of intuition or
I would
my
guess that
model of what
I
Bullock
would
is
guess
like.
that's probably liberal by like 19th century old world old
Yeah.
west standards. I would guess. I don't know some
Well, I mean,
gender
okay,
scholar
so
can
like if
tell
Seth
us.
Bullock saw like if he saw Saul Starr just like beating a random woman, would
No, you
he
can't beat
like
random women. You can't beat random women. Yeah, you're
but
right.
like a
Marriage
woman
is
you're
everything.
having sex with
Yeah.
or like
Yeah, having sex,
yeah.
even having sex is like not legitimate. That's considered like wrong. I think with so that it's like complicated. Like, what's the right relationship there? What do you think
Yeah.
about? What do you think about this Elma? Okay, first of all, it's hilarious that Bullock's wife is Walter White's wife is Skylar.
Yeah, yeah, Skylar White. I don't even know her real name, but yeah, I was like, oh, that's Skylar
It's
White.
so funny because like in Breaking Bad, she's playing the same role. She's just like sort of there and
Yeah.
like sort of a drag and like just a burden. Like she's just like you're in Walter's shoes and you're just like, my wife, I'm just trying to sell meth and do cool stuff. And here she is complaining that I
Yeah.
stay out too late.
She is
And
kind
like
of a
here it's
drag again, a wet blanket.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. She's a wet blanket in both. She's like maybe like a standard wet blanket. When you need a wet blanket, you grab this actress.
Yeah.
And you put her in the role.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because she's not a she's an attractive woman. She's but I guess yeah, her presence is kind of like there's like an eerie judgmental feeling or something about her face
Yeah.
and her eyes or something.
Yeah.
And when you're like, a man who's doing things that are, potentially unsavory, I guess like that feeling is not great. Um, so yeah, I wonder. Do you think like do you think Seth Bullock will continue to like try to keep that marriage together, because he does really seem genuinely in love with Alma? And
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that what the show did was interesting, because the way that he even saw them arrive into Deadwood, Seth and Al Swearingen, they were both like in like a pretty like realistic fight. I thought like it was really ugly. Like it wasn't well choreographed. It was just like a very ugly, brutal, realistic fist fight.
Yeah.
And what's like Seth Bullock is an idiot too, right? Like he really is like this sort of classical good guy, because he believed, like he asked before they started fighting, right? He takes off his badge and his gun, and he looks at Swearingen, and he's like, do you have a knife on you, or am I going to find a knife on you? And Swearingen was like, no, I don't need one, or something. He just believes him.
Mm.
And then yeah, near the end of the fight, Swearingen takes a knife out and he's about to kill him, until he sees Seth Bullock's son, right? And so his family indirectly saves him in a way. Like this family that he actually didn't want to be around is the thing that saved him from being killed. I found it interesting that was what stopped Swear. Like, was that realistic? I didn't know if like I know Swearingen has like soft side to him, and he's kind of he's not a completely evil sociopath. Like he employs that handicapped woman, and he puts the reverend out of his misery, and so there are like parts of him that aren't totally evil.
Yeah.
But like just like a little boy watching you, would that
Well,
be is that
I don't
really
know. I mean, the
enough?
whole town was like watching. I don't know. Like, could they? I mean, they have like they have like mob justice. I mean, I don't know. Like, can you just kill someone? Can you kill the sheriff in front of everyone? Like when you have him down, I think there's reasons not to kill.
Well, later in that episode, though, when Swearingen's in the jeb, he says something like,
Yeah, like the
"It was
kid
that the
demand.
Catholic kid unmanned me."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but at the same time, you think like I don't know, like it doesn't seem like this is a thing where people can just commit. People do commit murders and just get away with like daughtery, like they kill each other in fights. I guess I don't know if that's like considered acceptable or whatever to like kill someone in a fight versus like sneak up and shoot them or something. Like that's obviously not okay. But maybe killing someone in a fight is just sort of. But like Bullock was down and he was like above him, so maybe there's like some law or norm about like that's not you don't kill person in
well,
that situation.
what are they gonna do to Swearingen realistically anyway? Right? Like he's the king of the town. He
He
has the
is,
most
but I mean, it's
power.
yeah, but he wants. I mean, he can't go around publicly, just flouting all the rules and killing
Right,
people.
but if he's in a clearly like what was basically a life or death fight against Seth Bullock, and he pulls out yeah, I guess it is unfair. I don't know what the norms or the mores are around like fair fights at that time, but yeah, I guess like if he pulled out a knife in what was supposed to be like hand to hand combat and kills the sheriff, yeah, I guess I could see that going either way. But yeah, would it like okay, so assuming that the reason he stopped was the kid looking at him, that didn't seem realistic to me. So I guess yeah, maybe your interpretation is right. Like he wants to believe it's the kid, or maybe it was like partially the kid
Yeah,
watching him, but then also partially him, doing the sort of mental calculations of what would happen to him if he were to actually kill Seth. Um, but again, like if that kid hadn't been there, I think Al would have killed Seth Bullock. No?
I think you needed both. I mean, yeah, I think it was both. I think like the kid maybe made him reflect for a second, and
Yeah.
maybe it looks worse if you do it
Pause.
in front of his. I don't know if he knew it was his son or his wife. I don't know if he knew. He probably didn't know that. But like to
Yeah,
kill,
he just
to
saw it was a
slice him up in front of
kid.
a kid, slice him up in front of a kid probably looks bad. That's probably against
The other
norms
thing that
too.
was interesting in that scene was the sort of awareness of Seth's wife. I don't want to call her Skylar White, but I'll just call her Mrs. Bullock,
Mhm.
where she was covering the kid's eyes when Al pulled out the knife, and as Al's walking towards Seth, she uncovers the kid's eyes because she was aware that possibly, at least this is my interpretation of the scene, is
Mm.
like she was aware that possibly if she uncovers the kid's eyes, then that would stop Al from actually going through with the murder, right? Like, but if the kid's eyes are closed, then Al would, he would have gone through with it because he wouldn't have
Mm.
experienced any guilt or anxiety or something.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one too, where she was kind of aware that this could potentially save Seth from being killed. So that whole the whole like those kind of subtleties in the show, I really appreciate. That like clearly they've thought these things through and there are layers and like the multiple interpretations of why he didn't kill Seth, right? It maybe wasn't just the kid; it could have also been the town and the onlookers, and
Yeah.
yeah, there's like multiple readings of what happened there.
What do you think about the Alma character? She strikes me as sort of absurd. Like the way she talks seems
Mhm.
like completely, unrealistic. Like she's got this like very like high register that she like always sticks with. Like someone will say, "How are you today, Mrs. Garrett?" And she'll be like, "Well, it would be an interesting proposition to reveal my feelings at this point in time. Although when I was a girl, I once remember." And like it's like so sort of scripted and like I don't know, did like Boston elites talk like this in the late 19th century? Maybe like they
Yeah.
cultivated that kind of like this was like a way to be a female, refined and charmed. I don't know, but it struck me as very odd, sort of in the context.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I think they may have, yeah,
Overdone it.
slightly, yeah, overdone it a bit, just to make it clear that she's not, she's not a typical resident of Deadwood. She really is from like another town, another place, another sort of society, and yeah, so they show this with her speech and her mannerisms and like the way that she really her interactions with EB cracked me up when EB was making offers to buy like the gold mine,
Mhm.
and she was like, at one point he was like making an offer and she's like straight up just said like just please stop talking to me and get away from me. And then later she's talking to Seth Bullock and says like, speaking with EB makes me physically ill, because he's such a, he's like, he really is like this kind of greasy, like just like everything about him, right? And so like it would make sense that a woman from high society would feel that way towards him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is his last name Barnum or Farnham?
EB Farnham, I think.
So Farnham and Bailey Circus is that related?
I don't know, actually, maybe, but
Yeah,
yeah,
what
I
if it
didn't I
is?
didn't look into
What if
that.
it is? Because that would make because like he looks like he would run a circus. I mean, that seems like the kind of thing he would do. I wonder
Yeah.
if I'm not looking up any of this stuff because I don't want spoilers, so I just have to.
Yeah.
I'll do all that at the end.
I remember I read this article a couple of years ago from John McWhorter in the Atlantic, and he was talking about the speech patterns in Mad Men and how the Pete Campbell character,
Yeah,
he enunciates every single word perfectly.
yeah,
Instead of saying like, are we going to do the merger? He said, no. Instead of saying, are we going to do the merger? He says, are we going to do the merger? Very clear, very, not gonna. He's going to say going to. And
yeah.
McWhorter said that actually a WASP in the 1950s or the 1960s would have said gonna, and so he said like the reason they did this with Pete Campbell, his speculation was that like they wanted to make clear that Pete Campbell went to private schools. He went to an Ivy League college. He's just like a very well educated, well spoken character, to contrast him with Don, for example, who came from poverty.
Yeah.
And so they
So,
took
so,
some creative license with the
so
speaking.
what should they have done to show how the differences in how they speak? Like, what
Well,
would
no,
that
no, no, no.
be?
I think like basically the point is that like the writers may have taken some creative license with their speech just to like
Yeah.
underline the class
Yeah,
differences.
they underline it, but
Yeah,
what would they have realistic? I mean, it was just the same thing they enunciate, but it's like they just exaggerated it a bit because like
I that one I don't know. I think like the idea was that the way that they spoke wasn't so different than like the way a typical educated American would have spoke. Whereas actually in Deadwood, maybe they did go a little bit too far, because right,
well,
like people
well,
in
I mean,
Deadwood speak a certain way.
yeah, I mean, it was earlier in history where like regions didn't have like they didn't have much contact with each other. I just think the Alma thing. I mean, I just think it was unrealistic because like nobody would like have like paragraphs on their top of their head like every time you asked them they could like have like
Well,
this very
all of the
beautiful.
dialogue is a bit elevated, isn't it? I mean, the whole thing, it almost like
Yeah,
it seems like a sort of like a Western Shakespearean
yeah,
series or something, like the way that Swearingen speaks, right? Like I get that we're supposed to like he's descended from like English nobility or something. He mentions this in like the first or second episode of the show where he's like, I'm descended from all of those cocksuckers, like referring to like all of the English nobility and the loyalists, I think, during the American Revolution, something like that. And so I guess he is like it's possible that maybe he was well educated and then sort of like ran off to start his own thing. but the other characters too,
No,
like
no, he
EB.
says doesn't he say he was an orphan? Doesn't he say when he's with that woman at the
Oh, you're right. That's
yeah.
right. Okay, so then, yeah, so that really doesn't make any sense why he speaks so well.
I don't think he
Uh,
speaks that well. I mean, he's just
I think,
charismatic. He's funny and he's like direct and he's like, he's like, oh, who
oh no, no,
farted?
no,
Who cut the cheese? Like, a lot of it's
no, no,
like
no.
sort of
He's
that.
he'll dictate articles to Merrick, right? Like the Pioneer, the town newspaper,
Yeah,
right?
but
Like
sometimes like they
he's
won't know how to spell a word or they won't know a word. Like they'll show you that too. That sometimes they don't do. But he's
that's
charismatic
true.
and smart. I never get
Yeah,
like, oh, this is I never get this like unrealistic with him like with Alma. I mean, like
yeah,
Bullock. And Bullock is always like every word he says to you is like a transaction or like a matter of honor. Like I will be there at that moment, right? Like because
yeah, yeah.
that's the honorable thing for me to do. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, yeah, to me everyone just speaks like a little bit more
yeah,
eloquently than I imagine people in the Old West actually spoke. But yeah, I mean Alma is like she does stand out, but I just assumed that was because of her sort of Boston Brahmin
yeah. No, of course
background
that's
and
yeah,
her husband too. Was it Brahm who yeah, who they killed.
yeah.
Yeah, he kind of spoke that way too. But yeah, all of them. I mean, even Jane, right? Calamity Jane, the drunken woman. Um, yeah, the way
I think that's
yeah,
Joan. I think that's Joan, and I
Jane,
think is it Jane?
Jane, yeah, yeah.
Oh, Joni is
Joni is
Oliver's. Yeah,
Tolliver's
yeah.
what like main woman. But okay, I wanted to ask you this too about Doc, right? So they portray the doctor as like a competent person who can be trusted and relied upon. But at least like my understanding, which isn't like that deep, but like my understanding of medicine up until very recently, like up until like the 20th century, medicine was like not like indistinguishable from quackery, right? And so Doc is seen as like someone who can actually handle severe medical issues. He builds that little brace for the
Yeah.
handicapped woman who works for Swearingen. And he's like, anytime anyone has an issue, he like seems to know what to do. He like does these autopsies on his own.
I mean, does he do
Is
it?
like,
Doesn't he do anything that? I mean, they had prosthetics, so prosthetics was a thing. So that wasn't completely useless. I mean, the people had those.
but it worked
Um,
though for her. I was like, there's no way this is gonna work for
well,
this woman.
I think they work. I don't think prosthetics were fake. I mean, because after the Civil War, I remember in the Ken Burns documentary,
Yeah.
they mentioned that Mississippi's like budget, like half of or like a third of their budget was prosthetics, like after the Civil War, because
Oh,
they
really?
had they had so many
Okay.
injured men
Okay.
that they it just became the prosthetics was like
Oh,
the
that's
entire
right. And
budget.
yeah, and she did like show Doc the like an image, like a photograph of the leg with the
Yeah,
prosthetic.
yeah.
So
So that existed.
that's
But as far
possible.
as like I
Yeah,
don't see him like
he
doing
doesn't
any,
fail, right? Like
what what
he never like does like he never administers any kind of medical treatment that like kills anyone or like does anything
yeah,
that would hurt
maybe that's
them.
why he's the best doctor of the time. I mean, like, what does he do?
Yeah.
Say he says take a rest. Like, oh, you're immune, so you take care of the the people who are sick. Get them,
Yeah.
keep them cold. Here's some opium for the pain. I mean, yeah, he's not doing like he's like a scientist. He's like,
Yeah.
he's like doing autopsies and wants bodies for that. But no, I don't see any proof he's like healing people. He's just saying rest, take some opium. I mean, there's not like a lot that
He
he's
just
doing.
seems remarkably just not efficient, but just like effective for a doctor, like in that sort of pre-modern
Yeah, but
era.
how do you know he's ineffective?
So
You haven't done studies of his patients and longitudinal
well,
data
okay,
and see
the
what the.
impression of like the doc, you're right. The impression the show gives of him is that like he's like a trusted and
Yeah, he's
reliable
trusted. I mean,
doctor.
but yeah, that doesn't mean he knows what he's doing. I mean, people believe in him. I mean,
But the
he's
show like portrays him as like never making any medical errors or any mistakes. Like I just thought it would have been interesting to like depict a doctor from that era, like clearly get something wrong, and in the present day maybe we would understand. But at that point they didn't, and so he was making errors that he couldn't have known, but was inadvertently killing people, or at least like prolonging their suffering before they just sort of healed on their own. Um, so
yeah.
yeah, that just seemed like a little bit too, I don't know. Like he's giving these prostitutes like lotion for their STDs, and
I mean,
none
I
of them.
wonder. I mean,
Yeah.
I wonder how much that stuff is exaggerated. Like, oh, doctors were just like butchers who killed you. Like, they probably weren't that stupid. Like, oh, here's some lotion. Like, they know what would feel good on like an injury and like what would not feel good, and
So,
what
so
what
yeah,
lotion.
so that was another, yeah. So you think that like maybe the popular imagination of like the progress medical science has made is maybe overblown, or like maybe it's
Yeah,
not
I
okay.
mean, I suspect there were some bad like leeches. Like, there were probably some things that were like so bad, but like as long as you didn't do those like really bad things, like I don't know, you might have been helpful.
Like
I don't
Saul
know.
getting shot, right? Like it looks like this show's going to do the thing that every show does, which is like a character gets shot, and then like the next episode or 3 episodes later, they're going to be like completely healed, right? Like Saul got shot during the sort of commotion around the fight between Swearingen and Seth Bullock, and yeah, you see him laying there, and he's like screaming in pain and undergoing the surgery, and like the very next episode, he's like wearing a cast and like completely fine, seemingly not in pain. And so yeah, that just strikes me like even in the modern day, if someone gets shot in the shoulder, you're not going to be walking around like the next day or the next week later. But in this show, it's like I don't know. They takes yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's a television show, but it's just interesting like what they choose to portray as like very accurate to the time versus where they sort of tiptoe around and cut some corners and maybe
Mm.
not portray the era
Yeah,
as accurately.
I don't know. I mean, is it I don't know. People were tougher back then. I don't know. They have experience with medicine of getting shot. I mean, they had the Civil War. They, I think they
Yeah.
probably like knew what works and
But was that
what doesn't.
information like widely dispersed and
Yeah, maybe
available
maybe I
too?
mean maybe Doc worked at that. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe Doc worked in the
Oh
Civil
yeah,
War. What was he
he
doing?
was in the Civil War. That's
Uh,
true. There was that. Yeah, there was that pretty like grim scene of him. Like I don't know if he was like acting out his PTSD or something about like these guys getting their arms and legs blown off.
oh yeah. Well, by
So
the
yeah,
way, okay. So the Reverend. That is, I mean, that
yeah,
when he started losing his mind, that was such a beautiful scene when they went for a walk with him, and he like, "Are you demons?" And they're like, "I'm Saul, I'm Saul from Vienna, and I'm Bullock from Ontario. Like, would you like to
yeah,
go walk with friends?" Like, yes, I would like that. And
yeah,
it's so funny. The when Bullock. So the funny thing about the when Swearinger takes out the Reverend, I mean, it's pretty funny because I wrote that euthanasia piece, and I was
Oh
writing about
right,
like I was writing about
yeah,
Hollywood like perceptions. Like, we generally sympathize with not with people who like just stick around forever, like people who keep them alive, but someone who's willing to sort of a good death, like sort of put them out of their misery. And I used I used some examples of this, and this would have been a great example to use in the article of like I think everyone would agree that it's like your Swearinger's just looking at it like Swearinger's looking at it like, why do we put him out of his misery? Like, why do we let that poor man walk around like this? And I think you're supposed to sympathize that this is a man who's doing what needs to be done. Now, that scene where he euthanizes Reverend Smith, it's back to back with the scene where the doctor is praying to God. God, why don't you take him? Why are you prolonging his suffering? So it's like
yeah.
God is not doing anything. And then Swearingen is just the hard man who comes and like does the thing that you wish God would do, but like you don't have the guts to do yourself. And so there's this other part. I mean, there's this anti-religious. It's like very 1990s, 2000s sort of liberal idea of like religion is stupid and like man needs to like rely on science and rely on himself because Doc when Reverend Smith goes, oh, it's just God's plan, whatever happens. He's like, Doc goes, this is God's plan. He's a cruel son of a bitch. So between that and the scene where Swearinger euthanizes Reverend Smith, there's this idea that like science and progress are like good and like religion is sort of stupid and holds people back. I
This
think
was
that
like just a few years before. I mean, yeah, that was like what one was the first? Was it 2004 that season one aired?
yeah,
This
this is the heyday of like liberal resistance to like the religious right
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well as
yeah,
like
George Bush is gonna enact a theocracy, and yeah, 9/11 and the
yeah.
rise of the new atheist movement, and yeah, Richard Dawkins was
Yeah,
just
that was.
about
I
to
think the
release
atheists were a few
Dog
years after
Illusion.
that, but yeah, it was in the air. So
It
you
was
see
yeah,
these political things like where it's not like it's not as political as something today would probably be, but it's like
yeah,
you do see sort of that and it's like it's a worldview that I sympathize with. So it's like a worldview like, oh, this the politics of this are perfect, they're apolitical, but the things that say it is cool. So
yeah.
it's
That
unique
whole
to sort of have
era,
that feeling.
right? Like Yeah, like before, yeah, basically, yeah, the 90s and the 2000s, that was like an era where you could sort of like, yeah, just like be more like balanced in your views about like science and religion, like right before things like, because once the new atheist movement took off, then it was like everything became like hyper partisan, or the ideological divides became like much more rigid. But at that point, like right before, it just seemed like movies and TV shows and everything just seemed like more reasonable in their portrayals, right? Like Reverend Smith is not portrayed as like a religious idiot or a buffoon either. Like clearly the show like portrays him with sympathy and respect, and people around him, right? Like despite
Yeah.
Swearingen not being he doesn't seem to be a particularly religious man, he does like have respect for Reverend Smith, and like he tells like he doesn't want him in the saloon because it hurts his business, but he clearly likes the guy.
I thought he was just depressing and freaking people out. Yeah, well, yeah, right. He does
Yeah,
is hurting his business. Exactly what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. And then when he kills Reverend Smith, right? Like he says something like, he has this like he leaves him with a kind remark about like you can go now, brother, right? And so Swearingen clearly has respect for a man of the cloth too. And so yeah, it was yeah, like a sort of a respectful portrayal. And yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, that this was a sort of an example of like compassionate euthanasia. And
Yeah,
the other thing that was interesting is that in season two, right, these first two episodes, someone, it might have been Swearingen himself, said that Reverend Smith was killed by heathens, right? He was out wandering around and he was
yeah,
killed by heathens, and that's the story that apparently like that seems to be the story that people are going with, right? Like because they can't just say that Swearingen put the man out of his misery. They have to craft this lie, right? Like the names of these two episodes are a lie agreed upon, part one and two, and this is like a lie that they agreed upon, which is that Reverend Smith was killed by heathens when he was out wandering and losing his mind. And that's interesting to me too, that they can't just say like Swearingen can't just say, yeah, I clearly the man was suffering and I killed him, despite the fact that people probably know that's what he did, right? Like why
yeah,
they need this lie is an interesting um,
yeah.
thread too.
Yeah, the heathens. Yeah, the race stuff is fascinating too. So it's funny. There's this one scene with a black guy just out of nowhere, right? You
Yeah, I
remember?
saw that too,
It's
and it
like
was like they treated him
nobody
like
cares. Yeah,
no one
just
even
treat him like any
acknowledged that
other
he was
dude.
black.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that
he
was an
comes in
odd
and like
one.
sort of even yells and is disrespectful to Bullock.
Yeah,
People like I don't know would a white man like even the Saint Bullock like would he
yeah.
have taken that in 1868 or whatever year it was? I don't think so. That was sort of strange.
That was like a very and no one said anything about it. No one mentioned it. It was
Well, it was just
odd.
Saul. It was just Saul and Bullock. You're right, but it's like I don't
Yeah,
know. Like I don't think the guy could have.
yeah.
It was odd to me.
Yeah, that was yeah. I remember that. Like I remember, I was like, "Oh, this should be interesting. Like, how are they going to treat this guy? Like right after the Civil War in the sort of lawless, what like a sort of outpost that not part of U.S. territory, but what are the attitudes around race? And we've already seen a little bit of it towards the American Indian tribes and with Mr. Wu and Chinatown and Deadwood. It's like I don't know. That's surprising to me too that Deadwood even has a Chinatown, because aren't they in like South Dakota or something? Like,
Yeah, I
is
don't know if
there
that.
how many Chinatowns are in that part of the
Yeah,
country?
it's pretty far east. You're right. I don't.
But
Yeah, I don't.
Deadwood does really exist. I haven't looked up anything about like the real Deadwood or anything about it, but I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting to know like how if and how they ended up with a Chinatown and with like
It's not
enough Chinese
impossible. I mean, the
immigrants
Chinese
there.
got around. I mean, it's not impossible, but
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
there's like the railroads and like maybe with the gold rush,
yeah,
and there were things going on at that time. But just yeah, if it was California or Oregon, I'd believe it. But the Dakotas, that's a little
Mm,
surprising.
yeah,
But yeah,
and I think Swearingen, like I think it's interesting. He's not racist. I mean, he isn't like he's racist. He like uses racial slurs and calls people heathens and celestials. I love that for the Chinese. They call them
so that one I didn't get. I've never heard celestial as
Oh,
a,
it's like
as a racial
don't
slur.
they talk don't Chinese like the lunar calendar, aren't they really into the moon and stuff?
Oh, right. Okay, I
Pretty
need to.
sophisticated
Yeah,
insult, yeah. Because you looked
celestials,
at the square heads for like so that was realistic. So
square
I wouldn't be surprised if Celestials was something they said. I love, but
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great insight.
I'd never heard Celestial. I'd never heard Squarehead either. I Googled Squarehead because I actually didn't know who they were talking about in those first, like the first episode or the second episode.
Oh, I
Just like,
understood from context. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I thought I did, but then I'm like, well, what is it about them that would be like Squarehead? And then I looked it up. I'm like, okay, I guess like that was like a slur for Scandinavians at that time. But I like how they used it as a sort of a catch-all, right? Like even for the language, like they're like, oh yeah, we heard them speak in Squarehead. Like, just like a very I don't know, just like a simplistic slur that was a catch-all for everything about I guess like Norwegians. And yeah, the slurs against the Chinese community, and yeah, the sort of yeah, Swearingen, he has like he uses the slurs, but I don't think he uses it like necessarily with malice, right? Like it was, I think it's realistic in that they use the slurs because that's just how people spoke, right? Like that was
yeah.
like a normal thing,
Yeah,
and
and
I think
Swearingen doesn't like
yeah,
Tolliver. It's interesting because it's interesting. He's using the racism in order to advance his own. He's like convincing these drug addicts that I may be a I may be a dope fiend, but I'm I'm still a white man and
I'm
I don't
still a
deserve
white
to be
man.
fed to pigs. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's really so
Well, I
it's
think these shows generally have to like they kind of do this where they like all of the smart characters can't be real racists, right? Like the smart characters tend to use like I'm talking about like prestige TV shows where
yeah
like anytime there are racial complexities involved, the smart characters always use racism instrumentally to like get the
yeah
stupid people to do something or to like stoke animosity or to advance their names. You saw this like I don't know if you've ever watched Boardwalk Empire,
no
but they did this too. Like this was in the 1920s in Atlantic City, and like yeah, the Steve Buscemi character, he's not really a racist, but like he's kind, he uses the slurs and everything, but not because he holds any animosity in his
Well,
heart,
that's
but he
because
uses
they're
it
Machiavellian, right?
instrumentally.
Yeah, because I think they're Machiavellian, and like so,
Yeah,
like they want to use people how they can. So is
right.
is Ty is Cy Oliver? I think he's a real racist. I mean, I think he wants to use it for his own ends, but he's also like, oh, so it just gets me mad, a white man. I do feel like that's
You
legitimate
think
too.
that's legit? You don't think that's putting on like trying to stoke
It's
animosity or
no,
trying?
it's for his own interest, but I think he believes it and knows it's powerful and it works.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know. Well, okay, so I guess like with Swearingen, the evidence that like would Cy Tolliver do business with Mr. Wu if it would like benefit his bottom line? I mean, that's not like the only or the best even way to determine like whether someone's a racist or not. But yeah, like with Swearingen, I don't really.
it's actually a
Yeah,
good question. Yeah, I don't know if and Oliver, it's interesting because racism is like uh anti-racism is like high class and racism is low class today. But it's sort of like, okay, back then it was like, the Bella Union is trying to be higher status than the Jet.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
like they would only deal with whites, I think would be sort of like a high status kind of thing,
Oh, interesting.
while Swearingen would deal with Chinese and deal opium. Like he doesn't care.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he doesn't serve Chinese patrons, right?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
he
Oh, of
like
course not. That would be too
yeah,
far. But
yeah. He asks Mr. Wu to leave out the back, because he doesn't want anyone getting the wrong idea. But he's also not that upset when he enters the front, right? Like when he goes through the front of the saloon and the guys are like, freaking out, what do we do? What do we do? And like they close the door because they don't want to see
yeah,
anyone else. They don't want anyone else to see that Mr. Wu's in there,
yeah,
and Swearingen doesn't care, right? He's just like, send him up. I need, well, let's see what he wants, because clearly he knows that if Mr. Wu's willing to walk through the front of the saloon,
yeah.
then like serious is
Well,
happening.
that's what makes the black guy, I mean, so strange because it's like he just walks into the hardware store and nobody even like treat him like anyone else. I mean,
Yeah. There's
it is
something odd about that. Oh, the
yeah.
other thing that's so Swearingen also, he doesn't seem to be there, like he's not an actual an actual racist, which is when he leaves Mr. Wu's like butchery shop or whatever. He walks out like complaining that Mr. Wu's ripping him off. Remember, he's like, how come every time I go in here, I end up paying twice as much for a cut of meat as I thought I would when I
Yeah.
entered. And he looks over at who's with him. Is it Ellsworth this time, or maybe it might
No,
have been
it's
EB?
Ellsworth is not Swearingen's guy. Ellsworth
Who's
is his own guy.
okay? So then maybe it was
It was probably
No, it
Dan.
wasn't
I think it was Dan
Dan.
Donnery.
Dan, not EB. Okay, it was Dan. And he says, yeah. So Swearingen says, basically the reason why he likes to leave complaining this way is because it makes Mr. Wu look like a big shot
Yeah,
in
yeah,
front of all the other Chinese people. and so he's kind of doing him a favor, right? Like it's a show of respect,
But
because they're
he has an interest. He has an interest to do that too. It's not just
yeah.
he's the guy he deals with, so he needs him
But
to.
that's something that he doesn't need to do either, right? Like he could just do the business and walk out and remain silent,
No,
and even
he has an interest in Wu being high set because
yeah.
Wu is I think his status is hurt in his community because of the two Chinese guys who got killed, and he only got one white man to feed to the pigs
Oh
because of
no,
that.
no, no! It was
So
only one Chinese guy killed, right? I think it was
no, no,
just
it was
one.
two. No, it was yeah, it was one. It
I was
was one
pretty
for
sure it
one.
was one for
Okay, well,
one. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and so one of them would get away with it, anyways. That
yeah,
would hurt Wu's status if one of the guys who killed got away
yeah.
with it. And Swearingen has an interest in Wu like being an important man in his
Maintaining, yeah, yeah,
community.
because he's willing to deal with him. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. So I don't. Yeah, I wonder if there's any explanation for, and if that guy will come back, the black guy who
Yeah,
entered
I think
the
they
hardware
wouldn't know what
store.
to do with him, like because it would be like you have like they're always using racial slurs. What are they going to say about the black guy? Like you were disrespectful African American gentleman, walked into my
Yeah,
saloon. How could they do?
yeah.
They can't do it, and they can't not do
So
it, right?
then I guess the question is why put him in the first. They could have tiptoed around it, or they could have just
It
completely
just felt
ignored
like
the
they
race.
needed so it's like you have Bullock and maybe you have Saul. Okay, Saul is a minority; he's a Jew. Like he's
Yeah.
maybe more liberal on these racial questions, and then you have
Were
Bullock, who's like a good
were Jews
guy.
more liberal in the 1870s or whatever?
Yeah, I don't like he's cosmopolitan. I mean, he's from Vienna. I mean, you can imagine
Okay.
he's compared to other people,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
like they needed a black
Uh,
guy. Like the only way they could do this was had to be only Seth and Saul. Any other two characters, like somebody would have
so
called them a
you think
racial slur.
it was purely for racial representation,
I don't
right?
know.
To just
I
like,
don't
yes,
know.
black people existed in the Dakotas in the
Yeah,
19th
I guess
century.
here's a
Let's
black
throw them
guy.
in there.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it
like
would be
if it was
representation.
today, like the black would be like a black guy would be like one of the main characters, and he'd experience racism and overcome it, and blah blah blah. This They don't
Yeah.
want to do that. They're not
Yeah.
doing that. They're trying to tell a historically accurate story, and but they like don't want to have zero black people like even at that time like ever.
But
And
then
so it's
they
just like
gave him a speaking role, which was they could have just shown him like move through the store or doing some work, or like they could have just had like a like a non-speaking scene, but they
oh
had
by
him
the way
like have this
there was
aggressive and hostile interaction.
yeah, by the way, there was another. You might have missed this. There was another black person I saw on the show. You might have missed this. I think it's when Bullock goes to hunt down the killer of Bill Hickok, and he's in that other town. I
Mm.
see a black lady serving. I see a black lady like serving in the
Oh,
bar.
okay.
And so like okay,
Huh.
she's like I don't know if she's like a waitress. Maybe they'd have slavery, but they I don't know what would they have back then. I don't know if you just hire a black person. I don't know. Maybe like I don't know exactly how that would work, but I think I'm pretty sure I saw a black woman there. Um,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
right.
you're
And
doing
so
like a menial labor kind of job, like yeah, like
yeah,
the like Swearingen has the handicapped woman working for him, and she's clearly seen as like like there was that scene where she was
yeah,
walking
but
through the
these
town
are
and
different
people were
categories. I mean, if the Chinese guy can't even come into the bar, like would Swearingen hire like a black lady to do this stuff? I don't think so.
Oh, interesting point. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's
Maybe this place is
yeah.
like it's like maybe like a not a truck stop, but like some kind of like vagrant sort of gathering place, and maybe you could have it there.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have it anywhere else.
Yeah, well, it depends on where did they actually go? Because yeah, I think like different states and different yeah, like there were sort of different norms around race, I think, where in certain states it wouldn't have been unusual to for a black person to be like working like a menial service
Yeah.
job like that. Whereas yeah, the Dakotas it seems unlikely.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
are. I mean, there's a lot of like Southern accents. A lot of these people who are making their fortune, they seem to be out of the old Confederacy. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, what do you? Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, the racial angle is interesting. I mean, Bullock. I mean, Bullock is like a multiculturalist too. He honors the Native American. Like after he dies, he wants
Oh
him
yeah,
facing the
gives them the
flag.
proper burial
Yeah, yeah.
and
I thought that was too much. I thought, oh, this guy tried to kill him, like, and he was like, oh, we must respect his cultural, heritage. I thought that was pretty ridiculous. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, okay. What do you think about by the killing of Bill Hickok? Did that surprise you?
Uh well, so something that occurred to me when I was watching it was so like he developed this kind of, friendship with Seth Bullock, and I thought like, okay, you can't have like two ex-sheriffs like basically playing the same kind of like heroic, like classical heroic role, right? Like I know Hickok's a little bit older and he has this legend around him, but essentially like he's just who Seth Bullock is going to be in like 15 or 20 years. But you can't have like two characters playing the same kind of role like that. So I figured like one of them, probably Bill, was not going to be in the show for very long. I didn't expect him to die the way that he did though. But apparently that is what happened. I did read somewhere an article about how like Bill Hickok was shot in the back of the head in a saloon, and that's how he died. And he was like an actual famous character in
Yeah.
like the Wild West. But like the creator of
Yeah.
the show, David
Is
Milch,
Bullock, I
like
mean, is Bullock gonna be I mean, Hickok seems like it was a sort of a what was I mean, he was like was he like a Billy the Kid kind of character? What was he in real like he was supposed to be? He was supposed to
no, he
not
was
Billy
like
the
a
Kid, Billy
famous
the Kid was
sheriff.
oh, he was
Yeah,
a sheriff. Okay. He
yeah.
wasn't like an outlaw. He wasn't like Billy the Kid or something.
No, no,
He
no.
was
He was a law enforcement. But he was like a legend because I guess he just like was a sharpshooter and got into a lot of duels and killed a lot of people, a lot of bad guys, and
yeah.
so yeah, he was like a celebrity of his time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. He wasn't a particularly interesting character either, right? Like he didn't add that much to this show. I think his arc was fine,
Yeah.
and it kind of
It was there was
you
an
know
interesting angle. There was like this aging legend, and you see him when he's trying to get bread or coffee or whatever. He's like his hand is shaking. I guess he's got like Parkinson's or he's got some old man disease, and
yeah,
it's like, oh, how are they gonna deal? Like he's already like he's sort of reduced. Like they say he's panhandling. He's basically not panhandling. He's panning for gold. And like he doesn't want to admit that. And like they're saying, how can we make him money? And so people are like, oh, you should just like let them pay you to gamble at these places. And so like that was sort of like there's like and like people are like challenging him with their trying. It was sort of good. I mean, it maybe wasn't good. I don't know, good, but it was like sort of like he like maintained his dignity by like dying at the right time because he would have just been
yeah,
sort of stepped on and violated like for the rest of his life. And sometimes things happen like that. Like you get shot just in the back, like a legend just like is sitting there and gets shot in the back by some drifter bum. And
yeah.
like, did you see that they showed the bum being racist against the Chinese right before he went to kill Hickok?
I don't think I saw that one.
He's eating maybe like at a Chinese stand or something. And he's
Oh,
like doing like this with his eye. You don't see the Chinese, but you figure he's like mocking them.
yeah,
So it's like, this guy's a loser, hateful, and he's racist before he goes and like kills this man who was better than him. Like,
yeah,
he's committing a racial hate incident. I thought that was but
yeah.
none of this stuff is like, I don't think that's like woke. I think like, losers are like bitter and racist is like, a real thing that like, can be portrayed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mentioned that earlier. Right? I think these shows, the smart characters are never actual racists, but the dumb characters can be, and I think that's just kind of reflects like the biases of like creative types.
But
Like
I think that's mostly true. Like the American
I think
founding fathers were
I think it's
less racist
accurate.
probably than the average American at the
Yeah,
time. I
yeah.
think
I think
that's all.
it's not an unfair representation, but you just I don't want if never's yeah, probably not never, but almost always if there's like an actual racist character, they're kind of dumb, they're like a redneck or like like a loser like this character who killed Bill Hickok.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you just very rarely see like a
But
very
it's a
smart,
general thing
educated. You never see like Jared Taylor. Like you could see a Jared Taylor type
where Taylor
in the
walks into
Dakotas.
Westwood,
Yeah, yeah.
folks.
Yeah, yeah. With the what rate, you never see like
Yeah.
the like that guy, right? Like those people are never represented in these kinds of prestige TV shows. Like a genteel racist. It's always like a dumb idiot,
No,
redneck
but
type.
that's I mean it makes sense because dumb people just do dumb things for like dumb reasons. So like just to be racist, like against your own interest, right? And just like
Yeah,
try to hurt people for no reason. That's like something like a dumb loser would do anyway, right? So dumb people
yeah,
are portrayed as doing dumb things, like in their
yeah,
relationships with other people. So it would make a sense that they would be like, sacrifice to be racist, like against their own interests, right? So to be a
yeah.
real racist, you have to do something against your own interests. If you're just hurting someone because you get something out of it, then I think it's not. So like it's almost has to be true by definition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I guess it depends what you mean by hurting your own interests. Yeah, but yeah, that's yeah. I think it's probably an accurate reflection of reality, but yeah, there just seems to be this kind of resistance to the belief that anyone could be both smart and racist or smart and homophobic too. Like they're like I'm thinking of the scene in The Sopranos where Tony is like trying to like he's talking to Melfi about whether he should
Yeah,
kill Vito, and Tony like clearly doesn't want to, right?
yeah.
Like
He doesn't care about the
he's sort
gayness.
of
Like when
pressured to do
Paulie's
it. Yeah, like all of his other guys are like all of his sort of like dumb underlings are homophobic, and Tony just doesn't care. He actually cares more about money. He's sort of like what you're saying, right? He cares more about money. He cares about his interests, and has to sort of act against his interests because all the dumb people around him don't want to. They think that he should kill Vito, despite being him one of his best earners. So yeah, and Tony is like seen as like the smartest person, the sort of the protagonist, the audience stand-in, and so he can't really not like gay people.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you
yeah.
think? Oh, well, so in Deadwood, we don't have gay men. I don't see, but they have the
Oh,
lesbian, and somebody calls her a dyke at some point.
Joni.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the girl who was grifting off of them was and how did people have like some cultures they have this thing where like gay man is like bad or passive gay man, but like no everyone's always cool with lesbians. Like no one thinks it's like like these are attractive like
Well,
lesbians in the bordello. Like people, I don't think anyone would be angered by that, right? So it does show Oliver like just sees her, she's bathing these other women, and she makes out with one in front of Cy, and he's like, he's just like, just looking at her like, cool. I don't know, like he just looks at her. Is
yeah.
is it, what are they showing us? But they're showing us that like everyone's cool with attractive lesbians, like even in the old west.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, he didn't really react to it. I guess that would be like one interpretation, right?
She's like, I like
Yeah.
women, I don't like you. Like, don't come try to get with me tonight or something
Yeah,
like that.
there's like a double standard there. Well, what's interesting is that like usually prestige TV shows have a gay male character. There's usually at least one gay male. Very seldom do you see lesbians in these kinds of shows. But yeah, I guess if you're going to see a lesbian, it's got to be like an attractive. It's going to be like an attractive woman making out with another attractive woman in a bathtub.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, what's that?
right.
What's that? Jane. Well, what is her section? We don't see her with any men
Oh,
or
Calamity
anything.
Jane. Yeah, that's true. Well, she had a very interesting scene, right, where in the
Oh,
beginning of
she's
the she's afraid of Swearingen. She's like terrified, right? The show initially portrays her as like being this sort of tough. She swears a lot. She's aggressive and full of herself. And then she's supposed to like guard the little the little Swedish girl or Norwegian
yeah,
girl or whatever. And then Swearingen shows up to talk to her, and
yeah.
Jane starts crying and blubbering and saying, "Get
Yeah,
away from her."
she's sort of like a feminist character, but not a feminist character too. In that, like, she's
Yeah.
also hyper emotional and gets
Yeah.
scared. And
I think
well,
there's a proto-feminism to it in that like she wants to be strong and she wants to appear
yeah,
tough, but then in the face of an actual like male sociopath who's willing to do
yeah.
anything, she crumbles before him,
I thought
right?
there was a great scene with when Barnum was like talking to her, and he's like, and also, ma'am, if I am guessing your sex correctly, he just says it sort of off the head. I laughed
Yeah.
at that. I thought that was pretty. I thought that was really funny. Um,
Yeah.
the
They very
yeah,
seldom make those kind of jokes though, right? Like it's I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it seems relatively forward thinking on gender roles, right? Like Jane like dresses and talks and behaves basically like a man would in that era.
yeah, I thought it was
And
weird. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no one really calls her on
When
it or
she
says anything.
yeah. Well, I mean, besides Farnham, I mean, he makes fun of her, right? I mean, they do a little bit like that, but yeah,
Yeah.
when she goes with Bullock and when she goes with Bullock and the other guy Charlie to go get back his badge, yeah, that like they just accept her as one of like the crew. Yeah, I thought that was a little bit much. As far as her sexuality, she does when she's talking to them. She's like, "Oh, I did meet this one fella who kept giving me roses and was really one of the Finnish guy." She calls him like the Finnish guy. Um,
Yeah.
and so she seems like at least the man was interested in her at some point, and
Yeah.
she wanted to be a man. She wanted a man interested in her. The
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the homosexuality. I really, if somebody knows, like comment on this because I'm interested in this whether they just liked hot lesbians. Like if that would be so cool if that was if they were that much like us.
That's
And this
that transcends time and place and
time.
culture. Just, hot lesbians, everyone loves them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no I wonder like my prediction is because it always happens. There's before this series is over and then there's a movie too. But before the whole thing comes to an end, there's going to be at least one gay male character. There's always one. They always have to have like a token gay male
This
character.
was
Yeah.
not necessarily at this time. I don't
I
know.
think you're gonna see some like gender bender weirdness.
Well,
Like something's gonna
I
happen.
don't
It's
think
not
so.
gonna.
I don't think
You
it.
can't just have a bunch of heterosexual men.
No,
It
in
just can't happen.
2004, 2005, 2006, you can. I mean, I think it's like,
Hey, I mean, like
you know,
name another prestige show from that era that didn't have a gay male
well,
character. Like,
they're all a little later. They're usually not as early as 2004. When did Sopranos end?
Sopranos was 99 to 2007.
Okay, so
The
yeah,
Shield to roughly overlapped.
Mad Men was
Breaking Bad. Oh yeah, Mad Men had Salvatore. Breaking Bad, actually, I don't think Breaking Bad did they have a I
yeah.
don't think they had
Breaking Bad is. I mean, as I
an
talked to with
exception.
you and Chris Nicholson, are pretty right
Yeah.
wing. I mean, I think Chris
Yeah,
Breaking
there's
Bad
no
and
gayness. Is there
Saul.
any what about Saul? In Better Call Saul, is there any
Oh,
gay?
no, but it's the same character. It's Gus. It's clearly
Oh, Gus
It's
gay?
clearly Gus is clearly supposed to be gay. It becomes clear. Spoiler
Right.
alert for those who haven't seen Saul, who've seen
Yeah.
Breaking Bad. It becomes more clear. It's never a big theme.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
well, no, it's clear. It's clear in Breaking Bad. Spoiler. Fast forward a minute if you haven't seen Breaking Bad. But yeah, I mean that was his lover, that guy who
Oh,
got shot.
right. That he
Yeah,
got
that was, but it
he
wasn't a real. I mean, it wasn't a real storyline that you
yeah, yeah.
never saw
Okay,
him
okay.
do
So
stuff.
Breaking Bad has a gay male character. Okay, yeah. So this yeah, now I'm feeling even more confident that we're gonna see some gayness
Prestige. Every
in Deadwood.
Prestige TV show has a gay male.
Yeah.
Are there exceptions? Yeah, The Wire has this is a black guy.
Omar.
Omar, yeah.
Omar, yeah.
Omar. You're right. Every one of them has a gay character. How about that?
Mhm. Yeah, you have to have one. It's just you can't write a whole series without one.
This
Um
one's 3 seasons. Do you know why this got was it always planned? Do you know was this always planned to be 3 seasons, or did it get cut short? Do you have any
My
idea?
understanding is that it did. I think it did get cut short. I don't know why. Maybe budget. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. But I know that the Deadwood movie came out. I think in 2018 or 2019.
Oh, really? It's so we
Yeah.
could. Oh, okay. Now we know the gay character is going to be there for. Now we know for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was assuming it all was like around the. I was
Yeah.
assuming it was all around the same time.
But before, well, okay, so I'm like 70% that before season 3 ends, we'll see one. But I'm like 100%. Like if
Yeah.
not, then definitely in the movie. But
We're
yeah,
gonna
I
get
wonder how
black.
they're
We're
going to
gonna
do
get
that with
black
the movie.
characters too. Oh, okay. It's gonna be
Yeah.
interesting. I hope they don't. Oh, I'm
Well,
interested now in seeing how they deal with it, but I'm also worried they're gonna ruin it. They're gonna make it stupid.
it came out after, the second wave of political correct, like, it came out after wokeness, but it came before the summer of
Trump.
love.
Yeah.
So, and Trump, yeah, it was probably like overlapped roughly with the
Yeah.
Trump era,
Yeah.
but
Floyd was something
yeah,
else. Yeah. This was the Great
yeah,
Awakening. Floyd.
yeah. So yeah, maybe
I
it's
don't think
possible
Floyd.
they'll do it normally.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
What a terrible culture we've become.
Things were better in 2004. I agree.
I know, right? The okay, so we are where we are. So we agree that what happened with where we left off, season 2, episode 2. Bullock was trying to kill himself, right?
Was he trying to kill himself?
Yeah,
I
he was trying to
don't.
go. He wanted to swear because he had this choice. He had to either leave with Alma, or he had to stay. He couldn't take either one, or he had to cut off. And so he like wants Swearingen to just kill him. And
Yeah.
Swearingen like realizes it's like he wants a way out. And so this is why Swearingen comes out and like, oh, here's your badge, sir. I'm sorry. And like he's like torturing him by forcing him to continue to
Oh,
live.
right. That's a good. Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that's probably right. Like almost like a reversal of suicide by cop, right? Suicide by criminal. Like a cop. Yeah, yeah. That's interesting, right? Like the criminal who wants to get killed by the cops as a suicide. Cops could do it too. Suicide by criminal. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of yeah. That's a little bit of a different. Now, okay. Now I see Bullock a little bit differently. I think, but yeah, I guess that was his he couldn't resolve the guilt, right? Like he has his ideals and his morals, but then he also has his love for Alma and
Yeah.
yeah, that'll be interesting how that plays itself out.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, just one more thing. I'll talk about the Dan. Dan's like in sort of the Dan, the fat guy, who you keep wanting
Yeah,
to
yeah.
call Ellsworth.
Yeah,
Dan
yeah.
Dority. He's like in love with like not gay, not in a gay way probably, but he's just so worshipful of Al. It's really funny to like watch. He's like, oh, right, boss. Like, yeah, we're gonna get him. Like, and he gets jealous of like he starts relying on this other guy named Adams. And he's just like
Mhm.
he's jealous because he relies on Adam to do things. Like, no, I'm the one who kills people. Like, not Adams.
Mm.
And you see Swearingen is just sort of magnetic sort of charm, and you can see how like he deals with the guy. Like when Dad gets upset, Swearingen goes and like reassures him, like, no, you're my partner. Like not him. Like I saw how you killed that guy. That was awesome. Like he's giving him a pep talk. Like
Yeah,
Adams
yeah.
wouldn't have done that. Adams walked away. Right. I thought that was I don't know if he really means it for Dad or he's just smartly manipulating him, keeping him happy. But
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was a funny scene.
Yeah. He's his right hand man, right? His second. Yeah. So that, yeah, I like, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of those facets to Swearengen's character that I like. That he's yeah, he may be like one, like depending on how things go, but like, if they keep this level of complexity around him, he may actually be like one of the most interesting anti-heroes. I mean, I think Tony Soprano will always be like the number one, but yeah, Swearingen, like the layers to him, and even his, like, the scene where he's getting blown by not Trixie, but the younger prostitute that he replaces her with, when he's going on and on about like how he was an orphan and how his mother was a prostitute too, right? And so,
I don't think she was a
like,
prostitute. I don't remember. Was
I
she?
think she was. At least, like, it was. Yeah, I think she was.
Mm,
Um, and so, yeah, like he has, like, these sort of layers to his character too, and yeah, like you could see, like, Swearingen is like, he could have, like, he would have always been a successful person one way or another, but you
mm.
get the sense that, like, he didn't necessarily have to be like an outlaw to be successful, but there was something about, his experiences maybe that led him to like
Yeah.
go to Deadwood and start this whole new
Well,
life.
no, he went to
So
Deadwood. He was running. He killed a guy in Chicago,
right,
apparently.
well,
I,
yeah, but even the killing of that guy, yeah, like,
yeah.
yeah. So there's
And did you get when he was telling the story? I didn't understand fully. It was like wasn't he working? Was he working like at a whorehouse, and then like I think it
some
was a
Irish
cop and he killed
guy.
him, and the
Yeah,
cop
yeah,
wanted like too much
Mick
money, which
Cop.
doesn't seem like in Swearengen's character. It doesn't seem like that would have been his self interest to
Well, I
kill him.
wonder if later we're gonna get more of that story, right? Like, if that, like, it'll be like, if that'll become a plot point later
No.
for Swearingen, if that'll come back to haunt him in some way, right? Because he paid some kind of a bribe, right? He paid $5,000 to make that go away. But I wonder if
And then
the cop
the
or
judge, and
something.
then they killed the judge, then they killed the judge, and they've never. I don't think they've ever settled exactly. They've got it.
Yeah.
They killed the judge, and no, it got did it oh, no, he brought him the warrant. He's like, "I
Mm.
have it." I don't know if that kills it, but, like, he has, like, "I have it in my hand, and now
Yeah.
we can be gentlemen," and then he just kills him anyway, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I think I think that settled it, or at least it settled it temporarily. I don't know. I like that scene where they put up a telegraph post, by the way. They're like, "Technology. Oh my
Yeah. Yeah.
goodness. Like, we're gonna be destroyed." It's like, "Well, what's the difference, boss?" It's just like getting a letter. And he's like, "You ever get you know, what did he say the difference was? Like, it's only bad news. It's like letters are
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
people, and this is just, people bringing bad news." I like that sort of just they're overwhelmed by the change, right? Getting a telegraph
Yeah.
pole.
Yeah. Yeah, that was yeah, I was a little surprised by that because Swearingen is a smart person, and so I would have thought they would write him as like a more forward thinking, like all the sort of like the uneducated hoople heads would be like, what's that? Like, oh, technology's so scary, and someone like
Yeah.
Swearingen would be like, oh, you fools, you don't understand, like, we're, this is going to make us money or something.
Well,
But
it's sort of
that's an
both. He
interesting.
wants to build. I mean, he wants to build. You're right. He wants to maintain his things coming from the outside. He wants to maintain his control, but he also wants to build Deadwood. Right?
Yeah.
He's like he wants it to be something bigger. So it's like he's very conflicted. Like, the feds could. I mean, he's got a warrant for his for a murder
For his
up there.
arrest, yeah.
So
Yeah,
they could get to him, and yeah, but he
that's
also
true.
wants things to work out. So
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that inner conflict, and even the fact that, like, he's allowing Trixie to live, right? Like, Trixie basically dumped him, like, shacks up with Saul when she's not working, and Swearingen, apparently hasn't inflicted any penalty on
well,
her.
I
He
think
hasn't,
it would be
like,
more dishonor. It would be more dishonorable to kill her because then that means he cares, right? She was just a
yeah.
prostitute, and like
Yeah, well, he doesn't have
she
to
wasn't his
kill
wife.
her, but he could find ways to make her life miserable in some way, or at least, like, yeah, there's something he seemingly doesn't do anything at all. He could hire someone else to kill her and, like, keep his hands clean of it, and make it seem like he didn't have anything to do with
No,
it.
but
But
then he would be admitting to
yes,
himself that he's a cuck. I
I
mean,
think
that
I
he
think
cares
some
that
part of
much.
him
Yeah.
wants her back.
It
So
is,
we'll
but also
see.
he doesn't want to admit to himself. If he hired someone to kill her, he'd admit to himself that he cared enough to kill
I
her.
think he's already admitted it to himself. I think he knows he loves her, but yeah, I think he's hoping,
I don't think he fully. I don't think he
he's a
fully.
romantic, I think,
I, don't,
Swearingen,
I think he knows, but he doesn't want to take it dramatic. You're
We're
right.
gonna see his boot on her neck once more before the series is out, and yeah, I hope they have a happy ending.
Yeah. So I love this show. This is great. I look forward to continuing to watch, Rob. I'm sad
Yeah.
it's only 3 seasons. I'm already looking forward. Like, oh man, only
Well,
we're
we got the
almost halfway.
movie too. We can review the movie too.
We got the woke, preach start to, we got
We'll
the great
see.
awakening version of Deadwood coming to watch it.
Well,
It's
that'll
just
be
everything.
interesting. I'm also curious how much longer after, well, even between seasons, how long they're going to like fast forward the timeline. But then, the end of the third season to the movie, that's like 15-ish
Yeah.
years. Like, are they
Yeah,
actually going
I
to?
haven't looked at it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't look
yeah.
at anything. I don't even want to look at the pictures of the poster because it tells me who lives. I don't know if it's a prequel. I don't know if it's a sequel. I don't know if it's
Oh,
anything.
interesting.
We're
No,
staying
I think
completely.
yeah, I
No,
think it's a
no, don't tell me.
continuation.
Don't tell me. I don't
All
even
right.
want to. I don't even want to speculate. But
All right. Well, we can. Yeah, let's do. What are we gonna do? Season 2 next, or?
yeah, we'll do the full of season 2, and it sort of depends on our schedule. We were only planning to do season 1 here, but I
Yeah.
wanted to watch more. So yeah, until next time.
All right. Sounds good.